What's up everyone? Welcome to the top 5 micro tips for Northgard. Does this situation sound familiar to you? You're having a pretty good eco and therefore also a pretty good army up, feeling like you are miles ahead of your opponents. But somehow they managed to beat you even though their army were a lot smaller than yours? Then these 5 micro tips for Northgard could really help you out to perform better on the battlefield. May it be in duels, team games or free-for-alls. These practices are a great addition to your playstyle in whichever game mode you prefer playing. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into the tips. And please remember to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you! The first practice I want to show you is called kiting and is something you might have already seen or done in other games. It can only really be done by ranged units, so Northgard you will do it with axe throwers, trackers or Signy after she got her ranged attack. The units you are fighting need to be melee units, since it will not work against other ranged units. Generally, you want to send one attack volley on your target and run away from it afterwards until your units are ready to attack again. You want to press the X button as soon as your units are ready to attack again, so the old order gets cancelled and they start attacking the closest target to them. After that, you want to run away again and repeat this process until you win the fight in the best case scenario. The idea is to pull the other units behind you like a kite and deny a big part of their damage in which they are hunting your units. You, however, have the advantage of having ranged units which don't need to stand right next to their target and will lose out on a lot less damage than the melee units will. This will get a lot harder after the warrior upgrade lets them charge your units, but is, if done appropriately, still the best way to fight them with your axe throwers. The better you get with it, the more you will understand why some players don't think that an army only consisting of shield bearers is a hard counter against axe throwers, since they can be kited extremely hard if not combined with upgraded warriors or ranged units. If you felt that the first tip were a little bit too general and you might knew it already out of other RTS or even MOBAs, the second tip is definitely something you wouldn't see in other games, because it works with the tile system that Northgard is based on. It already got nerfed a few times since it could be exploited pretty hard and were hard to counter as a player. In the current form, it is mostly used to clear out tiles with neutrals on them, a lot more efficient as if you would have done it the conventional way. To do it, you want to place a unit at the border of the tile you want to clear. Then you click the unit into the tile, have it do one attack and then pull it out into your tile right after that. In the best case scenario, you might have evaded all the damage you would have gotten and basically gained a free attack. Even if it doesn't work out as perfectly, you minimize the incoming damage to a lot less than if you would have gone for a full-on fight. You should always hit one unit if you get the chance to do it, so you don't end up with 5 wolves on a tile that are all low HP. But in the end, that would still be better than having 5 wolves at full HP. This strategy can be used in a lot of cases and is always more efficient than clearing the tile out conventionally. The only problem is that it takes a lot of time and attention that might also be useful in your eco or communication with your team. However, if you have some time on your hand and for example a chief standing around doing nothing, you might as well try to clear out a few units by Tiledancing. The third tip is also working around the tile system and basically something you will need to do because of the nerfs that Gyro has implemented to Tiledancing to make it a lot less exploitable than you could in the past. They've added a little attack cooldown of around a second when you enter a tile, which now gives a massive disadvantage to the army entering a tile to fight, since the other army will have a full second of dealing damage and probably also taking out units without the entering units even being able to attack. To counteract against that, players have started to bait with a unit at a different spot than the main part of the army wants to enter the tile. Like that, the other army will automatically charge towards the units to attack it, and the players will need to manually micro their units back to the border where they want them to hold. Like this, you will create little windows of time in which you can enter the tile without being in as much of a disadvantage, or even create an advantage for you if the other players aren't paying attention. This is basically a necessity in team games, since the disadvantage would negate even big difference in army sizes in favor of the defending team. Just keep in mind that losing one unit baiting is nothing against the damage you would take just entering the tile. With the first 3 tips, we covered the most common knowledge of micro in Northgard and are now entering the more advanced tips, which can be just as important as the tips we heard before, but are talked about less often and aren't as universally helpful, but can still easily decide the fight in your favor if you know what you're doing. First we're gonna look at splitting. which is a quite common practice if you are playing with axe throwers, but can also be used with your other units if you pay close attention to the fight. You don't want to have all your axe throwers grouped up in a big clumpy ball, but rather split them as good as you can to make it harder for groups of warriors to take them out, or shield bearers to get close to them and exploit the fact that axe throwers will focus the closest unit to them after their current target has fallen and negate a big amount of damage. Or force the axe thrower player to manually micro their units after every one they took out. If you can spot a big group of units charging towards one of your units, oftentimes your war chief, you can also micro away from the fight. Like this, the opposing units start hunting yours and don't contribute anything to the fight while they are doing this. You will sometimes pick the wrong unit of yours and basically negate the damage that this unit would have done for a few seconds, while the risk, in my opinion, is not actually that high and the payoff can be insane if you can actually pull it off. Get it? My last tip for this video will be regarding focusing units in a fight, or rather the right focusing. Just right clicking your whole army on one unit after another will usually not be the best idea. If you are not fighting against a bear with hibernation in winter, which in itself is a pretty bad idea, but sometimes even still the right one. If you want to focus down units effectively, you should rather take a small group of units of around 3 or 5 and focus down one unit after another with them. Like this, you won't have your whole army running around for most of the fight and basically overkilling the targeted unit, and still have an effective squad focusing and taking out units. Which in the end is of course better than splitting your damage on a huge amount of units, which are then still able to deal damage to yours. A pretty bad habit I oftentimes see in huge fights is players focusing the war chiefs of the other team. In general, it is of course a good thing to take out the other player's war chief, but keeping their high health pool, high resistance and therefore pretty low damage output in comparison to other units in mind, you would be better off to clear out a few of the lower health units like warriors. Since 3 to 4 warriors have a lot higher damage output than the chief would have and are a lot harder to save for the other player, since they have a lot less time to split them away from the fight and run into safety. One of the few exceptions of this rule would be the war chief of the bear clan with the relic. Since it can be so strong and game deciding, then it can be worth to get rid of her as soon as you possibly can. But this can also backfire pretty hard if the bear player manages to pull her out quick enough to negate another huge part of your damage output. So definitely do this with caution. And here we are at the end of this video. I hope that you got what you came here for and hopefully also enjoyed your ride. If you want to see more Northgard content like this, just hit the subscribe button and the bell so you will get notified when I upload another video. The only thing left for me to do is wishing you a wonderful day and a lot of fun with these tips in your next Northgard games. Thanks for watching and bye bye.